Welcome to the official Colts Podcast. We're coming at you after a 27-24 win. Welcoming in everyone from the Colts Audio Network and our YouTube viewers. The busiest lady in the National Football League, Larra Overton, is here. JJ Stankevitz is here. And guys, we got a lot to go over. We're going to go over AR and some Flacco news, and we've got what the latest is on the defense. Ben Arthur from Fox Sports is coming up. He covers the AFC South for Fox Sports. JJ had a chance to catch down with him. Hey, 0-2 start. Now it's 2-2. I want to start here, guys. I thought the Chicago crowd at Lucas Oil Stadium was head and shoulders above the Steelers crowd. Am I in agreement with this? It was loud, don't get me wrong.
I don't know.
But I thought Chicago was here and Steelers were here.
They did a pretty good job shutting them up early.
Yeah.
And I tend to give a little bit of an edge because the Steelers just have the terrible towels, which are so visible.
Yeah.
So I feel like that amplifies their presence, whether they aren't as strong in numbers or in noise. I just feel like that sight is always something to behold there. And then you got Ben Roethlisberger in the house as well. I mean, all of it. But hey, who knows better how to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers than Joe Flacco, right?
I thought that.
Come on. All those battles over the years between the Ravens and the Steelers.
That's great, yeah.
Perfectly safe.
The Steelers can't escape the guy.
Yeah, right.
He's in the
They can't get
division
rid of him.
last year, leading the Browns to the playoffs, and now it's like, we got the Colts. Yeah, he's on the bench. We got Richardson, and all of a sudden, here he comes, dropping dimes on third down and moving the ball and winning a game.
Can I give you guys a couple stats here?
Please.
So Joe Flacco has now thrown a touchdown pass for 5 teams in his career. Baltimore, Denver, the Jets, Browns, and Colts. Only Case Keenum and Tyrod Taylor have thrown a touchdown pass for more teams among active
about
quarterbacks.
that?
They've each thrown for
That's
6.
great.
So they're kind of crazy. And then this was wild as well. I dropped this one on Shane. He had not heard it yet, and this is pretty obscure, but pretty funny when you just talk about the history, especially all of these battles between the Steelers and Colts throughout the years. Indianapolis has now won 2 straight games, including playoffs, against Pittsburgh for the first time since 1968 and 1971.
Wow. Think about that. I mean, we could pile on that. That's incredible. 2 in a row like that. And both wins at Lucas Oil Stadium or on home turf. I love more stats like that. The Steelers have had 3 stinking head coaches since 1969.
Right, yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about statistics, 3 head coaches since as old as I am there. It's incredible. And one other fun Flacco stat that I heard that I know you guys both know, but just by chance, his family comes in for this game from out of town.
No, they're here. They live here.
But they hadn't been to a game
They hadn't come to a game, correct.
Right,
this was the first game they were here for, but the family is here and in town. Kids
Okay,
yes.
that's it. So
this just happened to be the first one that they got all the kids in and everybody was on site in stadium
Right.
for.
Well, we're going to find out what the latest is with the quarterback situation. I want to start there with you, JJ. AR, hot as a pistol. 3 carries, 24 yards, 3 of 4 for 71 yards, I believe, through the air before he goes down, goes out, comes back in, and then he's out for good. If you guys could, give me your thoughts on when that happened, that transition, and what Joe Flacco means to this offense. We saw it on Saturday.
Yeah, so let's talk about AR's hip injury. So as of right now, we don't know what his status is going to be for Week 5 against Jacksonville. That we're going to see what the practice report is, but the indication I got and just the vibe I got from Anthony is that this isn't a long-term thing. Mm-hmm. This is something that hopefully he can come back from sooner rather than later, with sooner hopefully again being Jacksonville on Sunday. Now we don't know that for sure yet. The other guy to talk about real quick is Jonathan Taylor. Mm-hmm. He's got a sprained ankle. Shane Steichen told us yesterday. Shane did tell us they've ruled out IR. So JT is not going on IR. Hopefully we see him back sooner rather than later, because those 2 guys are obviously so important to the run game. With Anthony, though, I want to talk about the start of the game, because
crazy.
That was for everything that Anthony has struggled with through the first 3 weeks. He was letting it rip. That throw to Pittman to start the game, where he was able to layer that thing between 2 defenders, so only Pittman could make the catch. That's the kind of throw that offensive coordinators dream of their quarterback being able to make. And Anthony just first play of the game ripped it. You could see he was getting into a flow of the game, and then the way that he impacted the run game, the run where he took it and he ultimately got hurt on the first time. 3 Steelers defenders go to Jonathan Taylor, and then boop, here comes Anthony, running through space out of nowhere. The impact he has, this was a game Mo Alley Cox told me after the game, he felt like they were going to score 40, Larra. if Anthony had stayed in that game.
I could have totally seen that. I mean, think about the fact that the Colts scored 14 points in the first half. That was more than the Steelers had given up in an entire game.
All season.
Season long. And these are just a couple of sideline observations because of the vantage point that I have on game day, not from a lot of extensive conversations. But Anthony went and got checked out in the locker room, evaluated after he took that second hit, of course. And when he came out of the locker room, he ran. I mean, it was not a full sprint, but it was brisk, right? To come out of the locker room, immediately get back onto the sidelines. So that was an indication to me, if he's moving that way, that this isn't as severe, certainly, as it could have been. He was making every attempt. At one point, it actually looked like he was going in, and then they pulled him back. He had some conversations on the sideline. The entire medical team was huddled up. They were certainly evaluating whether or not it was worth it to try to get Anthony back into that game. It seemed like that this was a situation in which they took the utmost precaution with him. If it were a situation that Anthony had needed to play, he certainly, from what I could observe, looked like that he was ready to do that because the guy never took off his pads, his cleats, everything. Like, he was fully suited up the entirety of that game, even after he was ruled out. So it looked like that he was kind of trying to defy any sort of advice, being that, okay, look, let's play cautious here. Let's see what we know we've got Joe for this exact situation. You felt like that you could get it done, and you certainly did against Pittsburgh. So from everything that I saw on the sidelines, I mean, Anthony was never restricted to the bench. He was never limited. He didn't have, that hip side oblique area ever like wrapped or any sort of reinforcement on that. So all of those things are usually, for me, right, when you're watching, are they doing this, they're doing that. The checklist in terms of things trending in the right direction, at least on Sunday, things are different, of course, when you get that feeling on Monday, Tuesday, post game. So Wednesday will be very indicative in terms of where he is, if he's able to practice. But he's so tough. I think that this is certainly a situation in which he's going to be good moving forward for the long term.
We've seen the value of his legs. Is this something that is monitored that says, hey, he's 80%, we would play him in a playoff situation, but because it's mid-season type of a game, does he sit for another week and give the offense to Flacco again? That's what we're going to find out, I imagine.
I think that's what we'll find out as the week goes on. The thing that Anthony told us after the game is that he wasn't able to accelerate the way that he wanted to because of the hip. So he could still, I've no doubt he could still go out there, he could run, he could jog, but the acceleration to take off and run probably wasn't there. Just if, maybe he's not able to push off the way that he felt like he, otherwise could.
And the other thing is the way that the Steelers were attacking him, right, and going after him. We're not going to get into all the officiating stuff, right? That's a conversation for other people.
Just real quick, the Steelers always toe that line. But look, this is not I'm not saying that as a dig at them. That's a compliment because Mike Tomlin always has those guys. You go right up to the line.
Yeah.
Maybe you get a DeMonte Casey, you get thrown out of the game. But you know what? We are never going to be we're never going to come into the game feeling like we're the less physical team. The Colts match that physicality in this game, thanks to EJ Speed and Nick Cross, which we'll get into later.
Yeah.
But I respect the heck out of the Steelers for how tough they always play. And sometimes it gets a little
that's not the defense. That's not the defense I want to risk my quarterback against.
Yes, exactly.
Right. How about this one, guys? Hats off to Braden Smith because TJ Watt, very, very quiet. Let himself out of the game late if you saw him running off the field. So I'm saying a silence on TJ Watt, which everybody was focused on going into this.
Did Gorman have an ear in when we were talking in your office yesterday?
Right.
Apparently?
Yeah, we were talking through the rundown yesterday, and I was like, check this out. I just went through all 29 of TJ Watt's pass rushing snaps on Pro Football Focus, and I watched them all back. Do you know how many times of 29 snaps a tight end got their hands on TJ Watt?
28.
14.
Okay.
Which is still, it's not like that crazy, but that's a lot.
Chip.
And that means that's 14 times that the Colts tight ends are like, you can't get out in a real route once you chip. But that did then lead to Drew Ogletree's touchdown because a coaching point the Colts had during the week was, hey, sometimes when you chip Watt, they're going to forget to cover you. That's exactly what happened on that mesh play where Queen goes toward Pittman and Pierce. They have 5 defenders around Pittman and Pierce, and boop, here's Drew just right over the middle of the field with no one around him. He gets in for a touchdown.
Wow.
But Braden on the other snaps where he didn't get that chip help, Yeah, he shut him down.
Hey,
that was great.
Let's stay there. Give me a little bit something on Tanner Bortolini in the day that he had, filling in for Ryan Kelly. Obviously, after the first touchdown drive, that was awesome. Every NFL fan saw it. He was sprinting from the end zone back.
That's a guy who didn't lack acceleration at all. He had all the acceleration. And the Badger to Badger connection, right? Blocking for Jonathan Taylor in that type of situation. Probably no one more excited than Chris Ballard, right, about that productivity in the run game from those two guys. And I kind of joked down on the sideline and in talking with Matt Taylor and Rick Venturi, I said, hey, who's more comfortable with Joe Flacco than Tanner Bortolini? Like, actually, is this a great situation? Like, I mean, obviously he was very productive and very comfortable starting the game with Anthony Richardson. And then from all that time they spent together in training camp, Tanner and Joe obviously finding that great connection as well. Yeah, incredible game from Tanner. Awesome for him to get that experience. I mean, no better test as a rookie than to go up against that kind of a front. Certainly hoping for the best with Ryan Kelly with that neck injury. We'll see how he progresses over the course of the week. But we've talked about over and over and over how significant it is, how imperative it is to have depth at both of your fronts. So to get to that type of a performance early on from your rookie, significant for this situation.
I want to go back to talking about depth. I just want to go back to the Flacco thing real quick. Because watching that Dolphins-Titans game last night, where Miami is that offense just looks broken. This offense that it was like nickname level good over the last couple of years, and it just looks broken. And there, you got Skylar Thompson coming in tonight, you got Snoop Huntley coming in. This is why you get a backup like Joe Flacco. And I said this on the podcast I did with Bill, by the way. Like, it's not just that Gardner Minshew and Joe Flacco are good NFL backups. They're guys you want to have in your room. I think Shane Steichen, we got to have a conversation about him being the best coach for a backup quarterback in the NFL.
Right.
Because, Rick Venturi talked about this yesterday on Colts Roundtable Live. For a coach to have the mentality of just, guys out, what do we do? And to switch his offense. You have to throw all those running plays you had with Anthony and Jonathan in the trash. They're out. They're out of your game plan now. You can't run them anymore. How are we going to make this offense be efficient? Well, by the way, Joe Flacco hasn't got a single first-team practice rep because those all obviously go to Anthony. And what Shane got out of Joe Flacco in this game against a really good defense when the Colts couldn't really run the ball after Richardson got out of the game, incredibly impressive, once again, by Shane Steichen.
Also, the man showed some wheels in there as well. Did you see Joe breaking up, sliding a little scramble? Come on. He's still got something in there,
Yeah.
Obviously not the same amount of run threat, but I was like, let's go, Joe.
Even last year when he was in Cleveland, some of the stuff they were doing with boot action, getting him on the move, he's still athletic.
The perfect fit.
He's still athletic.
The perfect fit here. Cleveland didn't come after him. He had success with them last year. He's got Steichen friendship with them, obviously, with the Eagles that they had. So it was coming here. A great fit, and he shows that he can go out and win a game against, arguably at the time, the number one defense in the NFL.
Can I also just make one more point here? Because this is something that I think lazy sports talk people are going to talk about. Anthony Richardson's the Colts starting quarterback. What are we doing?
Yeah.
This is not should the Colts put Joe Flacco in? No, absolutely not. No shot.
If Anthony's healthy and ready to go, Anthony plays. That's the bottom line here.
If you hear or see anyone say Joe Flacco should be the Colts starting quarterback over Anthony Richardson this year, turn him off, mute him on Twitter. Just stop. That's not a thing.
Right.
It's not a thing.
But
not a thing.
In a pinch, though. Boy, oh boy.
In a pinch, you love having Joe Flacco on your team.
You
did not sign Joe Flacco to start over Anthony Richardson.
I love it. Let's give some really quick guys. Michael Pittman, boy, what a great day. We had 3 weeks on when's he going to do Michael Pittman stuff? We saw that. Josh Downs as well. Him back healthy like that. Wow.
Over 100 yards in the first half for Michael Pittman. More yards in the first half than he had for the first 3 games combined.
Welcome back.
Let's go. Yeah.
Well needed right there. Josh Downs, another great one, showing his importance to this offense, whether it's AR or Joe Flacco, when there's some big catches. Obviously, the TD was huge.
Yeah, Flacco went 6 of 6 on third down. All of those went for first downs, and 4 of those went to Josh Downs.
How about that? That's lovely. Do we even need to flip the switch?
Oh, and really quickly, I'll just piggyback that. Josh Downs, I heard him say yesterday, he's not even 100% yet. He's close. He's in that 90, 95%. Feels like he's getting really close, but said that he still isn't where he feels like he needs to be. So think about how dangerous that factor is as well. He's a day like that and still feels like there's slight limitation, which you would expect.
Right. I think a lot of guys who came into the season banged up, like even Tanner Bortolini talked about this, of like he had the toe during the preseason, and it's like you're probably not actually going to get to. You're probably not going to get through that until the bye week. The Colts have a very late bye. It's week 14.
Right.
So, it's going to be a while, but you're good enough to play, and you're good enough to play at a high level like we saw with those two guys.
Hey, don't forget, at JJ Stankevitz, at Larra Overton on Twitter X, the latest and the greatest news that you want for your Colts. It's available between these two and also at Colts.com. Can we flip the switch? Do we even need to talk about? Yes, we do a lot. No Kenny Moore into the game, defensive secondary, the way that it did. We saw them starting the game with Carlisle in this base sort of a defense, but boy, oh boy, when it switched up, the defensive backs, I love it, man. Things are going well right now, even with the injuries, Larra.
Sam Womack, Chris Lamons, the job that those guys did. And Nick Cross, JJ, we've talked about it, just the level with which he continues to play with all season long. Everyone had these, kind of thoughts and skepticism surrounding the Colts secondary. It's a good thing I don't have 9 things to host today because I am just stumbling over all the words. But there were all, skeptics and all of us concerned. There's zero concern right now, right?
I think the secondary has absolutely held their own in a way that, especially with Juju Brents being out back there, that it's been really impressive. That you get, Justin Fields threw for 300 yards. He was able to, make some plays, but a lot of those came when the defensive line, maybe didn't stay in their lanes and he was able to escape the pocket and make something happen. A lot of it wasn't in rhythm passes that guys were just missing assignments. Sam Womack had a bunch of moments in this game. He had a couple breakups where he's driving on a little stopper up by Pat Freiermuth. Really good moments there. I want to talk about Nick Cross though. I think Nick Cross might be a dude. That has been maybe one of the most positive developments for me for this start of the season, because you didn't really know what you had in Nick Cross. The guy was drafted 2 years ago as a 20-year-old. He's the youngest player in the league when he made his NFL debut in 2022. He, gets benched his rookie year, doesn't earn that job back until late in the 2023 season, and you're kind of is he going to play free safety, strong safety? What are you going to get out of the guy? And training camp, it's sort of the competition of is he going to earn that starting role? And then he does. And through 4 weeks, I'm I think the Colts got a real player back here. But this is something that Chris Ballard has talked about.
You saw the traits.
Right. He saw the traits, but he's it's not Nick Cross's fault that we had him start at 20. He was an NFL starter at 20 years old. You're seeing, I think, he's really understood how to play defense in the NFL. He's, you grow up from 20 to 22, and you're seeing what he's doing against the run. The guy, he's got 47 tackles this year, tied with EJ Speed, who's also having an awesome season.
Have to go there, yeah. Have to go there. Great year.
And in coverage, he's been solid. I am so impressed with what the Colts are getting out of Nick Cross right now.
EJ Speed, 8 straight games with 10 or more tackles. That ties an NFL record with Zach Thomas.
Tarleton. Pretty good guy.
Tarleton, they can, doesn't matter where you're at, they'll find you.
I highlighted this on Instant Reaction on Sunday, but I just want to highlight it again. The play that he made on Najee Harris to keep him in bounds, or to keep the clock running late in the game. What a play that was. But that's just in it. I asked him about that after the game. He goes, well, we practiced that, so I was just carrying practice to the field. Very matter of fact, that's such a heady play. And the situational awareness, in addition to the physicality that he's playing with, this is, you're seeing a real ascension from EJ Speed.
Love it.
Also, he's just one of the most fun guys in the locker room. He's such a just all around. You can have so much fun with EJ Speed. I want to give a shout out to our social team because there's a video that went up last week. It's on Instagram, it's on Twitter, it's on the Colts TikTok, but it is guys reacting to EJ Speed's high school highlights because if you didn't know, EJ played quarterback, he played receiver. I think he punted.
He punted. He absolutely punted.
In high school, he didn't convert to linebacker until his sophomore year at Tarleton State. But these highlights, he was such a great sport about it, but the reaction from the guys in the locker room watching the high school film is
highlights
phenomenal.
In quotations. There's a lot of picks. It was hey, we got your high school highlights, handed him an iPad, and it's just him throwing picks and stuff. But
He's the guy you could do that with. Like,
Yes. Also, just real quick on that, the amount of work it took for our social team to put that together.
Shout out to Zach.
Shout out to Zach Wilson, not the quarterback.
Yeah,
he was rolling through like Max Preps highlights for like guys who never played in college and from like 2012 to find these highlights of
so good
playing EJ Speed's high school. Just an incredible amount of work. That was awesome.
That's
great job.
Love it. And Colts.com, social media, you got to check them out. Before we get on, Ben Arthur from Fox Sports is coming up. JJ had a chance to catch up with him and find out what the national media thinks of the Colts and this AFC South. Wow, we know DeForest Buckner for, we were talking about that defensive line. Who needs to step up? Guys, give a little bit of love to these guys up front. Dio Dangbo for starting and what they were going with the running game and Justin Fields and what he brings to that. Really well played throughout the whole thing with no Kwity Paye and no DeForest on the field.
Yeah, I think, again, that's what, not to downplay it, but that's what you needed to get from this group. You've invested in the defensive line. You have made that through the draft. You've brought guys in free agency like Raekwon Davis. And yeah, that's to me, that's exactly what you needed them to deliver. They have been, as advertised, played up to certainly, I would say, a level of expectation or beyond. It is a tough task when you don't have Defoe, when you don't have Kwity Paye in the lineup, but those guys are there for a reason, right? And it was, to me, a really, obviously it was the most complete game, most complimentary game that you have seen from the Colts offensively and defensively. And yeah, I thought the guys up front did a phenomenal job. And a lot of that credit, Grover Stewart, just up there. He is the center of that entire operation, and he certainly does not get enough love or enough attention for the assignments that he takes and the opportunities that he creates for the guys that are surrounding him.
But also, shout out Raekwon Davis.
There you go.
Another guy who, like,
for sure.
What are the Colts doing signing a defensive tackle and making him their priority in outside free agency? Yeah. Well, this is why. Because him getting in there with Grove has really shored up the run defense. I want to talk just one quick thing on the defense, because I've seen this a little bit. That the Colts are playing a bunch of bad offenses right now. Like the first 2 weeks, you got Green Bay and Houston, good offenses. I know Jordan Love didn't play, but whatever. Those are good offenses. Now, so I'm going to go through EPA per play, expected points added. The Steelers are 20th. The Jaguars are 24th. The Bears are 26th. The Titans are 30th, and the Dolphins are 32nd. Those are the teams the Colts play from weeks 3
Not
through
a lot
week
of
7.
points expected is what I'm gathering.
Not a lot of environmental protection agency.
Yeah, right.
The point there, though, is just consider that a measure of, like,
sure.
These are offenses that are below average that the Colts are playing. But their defense was supposedly below average. And with all these guys being out of Brents, Buckner, you don't have Kwity, you don't have Kenny in this game, to still be able to win these football games, I don't care how it looks. Once you get Buckner back, hopefully for week 7 against Miami or week 8 against Houston, that's when I think this defense can really start to build. But you got to make it there, and you got to shut down these offenses that are not very good and win these football games, and that's what the Colts have done here.
Can I also just say something about some of those percentages and rankings and all of that? You were 3 games, 4 games in at that point. It's such a small sample size to have that type of a measurable, especially because we know the first quarter of the season, teams are figuring it out, right? You're establishing who you are. You're developing the identity of this. So I just think that obviously you can kind of find a stat to work for anything, but I think that it is worth just taking with a grain of salt a little bit stats like that this early on, especially when you have just those first 3 to 4 games that you're using as your evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point there is that the offenses that the Colts played when they played them were not very good.
Right?
Yeah. I think the Bears' offense is going to be much better. If the Colts caught the Bears in week 16, that's a different football game. But for right now, these offenses are struggling. When Miami comes to town and Tua still is not going to be playing in that game in a couple of weeks, that's an offense that is really struggling. The Titans, they put up 31 yesterday, but they've really struggled this year.
And Will Levis, what's obviously the injury there.
And then the Jaguars are 0-4, and I know they've lost 3 of those 4 games by 1 score, but they're struggling. So, whatever the defense looks like to me is just like, once Buckner gets back, that's when I'm really going to start evaluating, is this a defense that you can really contend in the AFC South with.
Hey.
But you can't get to the point where like you're already buried because of your defense and when you're playing some of these offenses that maybe are not successful.
Bottom line is this team started 0-2. This team's now 2-2, and we're looking at the next 3 weeks, and we're going winnable, 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 winnable. I mean, that's what I love about this group right now. 5 starters down from training camp and stuff like that. It's incredible what they're doing, and they can step on the necks of these next 3 opponents and get into a position that Steichen's like, all right, I'm comfortable here at 5-2. I'm not predicting anything, but look, we've got the ability to do that, whether AR is healthy or whether he's not, with Joe Flacco running this offense.
I made this point to my husband on Sunday night, and he kind of laughed at me.
What up, Tucker?
I said, essentially, you start the second quarter of the season with a clean slate. Because you're even at 2-2, you consider if you break it up like a lot of coaches do into 4 quarters of the season, you do. You kind of go in fresh second quarter of the season even. So it's basically you're 0-0 starting off in week 5. And he was like, I have never heard something as a totally manipulated sports talk type of take. I was like, no, I truly think that it is, right? Like, if you want to look at it that way, and this is a wild stretch of games coming up, 4 of 5 on the road for the Indianapolis Colts. You go to Jacksonville, you go to Tennessee, you're home against Miami, you go to Houston, and then you go to
Minnesota.
Minnesota might just be the best darn team in football, but there is so much to play out between now and then.
So real quick, I know we got to get to Ben Arthur, but just because thinking about the quarters, like I talked with Mo Cox about it, and he's like, if you do break it up, you want to be 2-2. You obviously want to be 4-0, but like baseline, you want to be 2-2 through the first 4 games. That's where you can build. For me, the next quarter of the season, at Jacksonville, at Tennessee, home Miami, at Houston, you're done with your divisional road games by week 8.
Yeah.
How do you come out of this stretch? Then the next quarter is at Minnesota, Buffalo, at New York Jets, Detroit. That is your probably your 4 hardest games of the season in that stretch right there. In probably 5 if you include at Houston. But then you finish, and who knows how these teams are going to look come December, but you finish with at New England, at Denver, home Tennessee, at New York, home Jacksonville. That's kind of the last quarter of the season.
And you get the bye week the first week of December, right?
You get the bye week between New England and Denver.
Okay.
You got some good defenses in there, in New England and Denver. But that's a stretch of games right there where right now, with a lot that can change, those 5 games look all very much winnable. This team could really, if they are not buried by that tough stretch, that 5-game stretch, this team could really start making some moves in the AFC.
We do it a 1 week at a time, and JJ Stankevitz had a chance to catch
I didn't do it 1 week at a time.
Well, I know, but we do those. We stack them.
The team does.
I like looking ahead.
Anyway, playoffs are going to be great for this team. That's what I'm getting out of it. So anyway, Ben Arthur
Starting at home.
From Fox Sports, who covers the AFC South, had a chance to catch up with JJ. Here's Ben and JJ talking about the state of the Colts right now at 2-2.
It is my pleasure to welcome back to the official Colts podcast from Fox Sports and the Fox Sports app, NFL reporter Ben Arthur. Ben, you got a lot of experience covering the AFC South. You cover the league at large now, but I wanted to bring you back on to talk about the state of the AFC South, given the Colts' next 3 of their next 4 games, are against AFC South opposition. All of them are on the road, and it concludes with a Week 8 showdown against the Houston Texans. Before we get into the AFC South, though, Ben, I kind of want your overarching thoughts on the Colts, where you think this team stands through 4 weeks at 2-2.
Yeah, I think, number one, the injury bug is certainly something to monitor. The attrition it's kind of hard to ignore it right at this point, particularly on the defensive line. Saw that Tyquan Lewis went on IR. You already have DeForest Buckner and Samson Ebukam there. Kwity Paye has an injury that he's dealing with. And then we're kind of wait and see with in terms of how much time, if any, that Jonathan Taylor misses, that, if Anthony Richardson will miss any time. But I think coming out of this Steelers game, there's kind of some reason for optimism, right? I think from an offensive standpoint, seeing Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs get going for the first time is huge for this offense. Coming into the year, right? They're the top 2 receivers, and we know the injury issue that Josh Downs has had, and then Michael Pittman has just kind of hasn't maybe been able to capitalize on those opportunities, at least in the first few weeks, and to see them get going, even if you didn't have Anthony Richardson out there as much as you like. I think getting those two guys going is huge for that offense. And then defensively, it's going to be interesting to see who steps up, right? I mean, having this kind of attrition on the defense, particularly on the defensive line, but we know Juju Brents is on IR. They've had some other things going on too. Like who's going to step up, right? Because I think after those first two games, right, when just kind of historically bad just in terms of run defense, and then being able to improve these last 2 weeks, and now you have the injuries start to pile up a bit. It's like, okay, who's going to step up now? And so I think that's going to come down a lot on the linebackers like Zaire and EJ and lot too. I mean, it's going to be an opportunity
it's a lot of guys.
For a lot of guys who are going to have to step up. So yeah, I think the injury bug, to answer your question, the injury bug is the thing that kind of sticks out to me the most about this team. But I think the flashes you've seen, particularly on offense, I think that's something to build on moving forward for the Colts.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I want to go in reverse order in the AFC South standings, because that also works out, Ben, in the order the Colts are going to play these teams over the next month. So the 0-4 Jacksonville Jaguars. I think I could probably start with a pretty basic question. What the heck's going on there? How are they 0-4?
Yeah, it's
simple,
a lot going on.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on in Jacksonville right now. I think you have to kind of start with coaching, right? Because I think the biggest problem with this team is they don't know how to finish games, and that's looked different in each week, right? Whether it's kind of, slowing down from a hot start against Miami, losing to a Browns team they shouldn't have lost to, or getting blown out on Monday Night Football, and then against the Texans where you really have a chance, even though you're down, particularly on defense, down so many starters, but you're hanging in with a CJ Stroud-led Texans team, but not able to finish the deal. So I think finishing is one of the biggest issues for this team. And that's so surprising because this was the same issue at the end of last year, right? And then actually a focus of this Jags team was bringing in a lot of guys who've played in Super Bowls or at least conference championship games to fill kind of like maybe that leadership void, kind of when things get tough, when you need guys to step up, you have that personnel in-house to be able to prevent the finishing issues that we saw at the end of last season. And so for that to continue into this season, I think that speaks to coaching. It starts with Doug Peterson. This team is not playing with any confidence right now. And if you don't have confidence, that's a very scary place to be in the NFL. And I think with confidence, you have to look at Trevor Lawrence's play too, right? Like he's never lived up to like that generational talent billing that he had coming out of Clemson a few years ago. But the way he's playing, he's playing as bad as he's ever played, like compared to even some of those games he had as a rookie, really tough sledding under Urban Meyer. But he looks just as bad right now as he did at times during that really rough rookie year. So I think it goes to confidence, and that ultimately starts with coaching. I don't really know how they fix it. I mean, it's a really, I think at this point, the Jags just need to see something go their way, right? And to their credit, they actually probably played the best for a full game that they've played last week against Houston, even though, again, they weren't able to finish and a lot of those same issues showed up. From start to finish, it was probably the best that it has looked to this point. And so I think if you can find any reason for optimism, and you know this well, being on the Colts side, the Colts haven't won in Jacksonville since 2014. So maybe there's something there. But yeah, there's a lot of issues. I mean, it starts with coaching, as I said, but then I think the confidence thing, and I think that's really clear with Trevor Lawrence at this point.
I know. I think there's only been one 0-4 team to make the playoffs in the last or ever, whatever it was.
Ever.
It was 92, yeah, ever. It was in 92 Chargers, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
What's the path out for this Jaguars team? Like, is there a path out for this team? Because I guess, Ben, when I started getting into the Jags this week, and I kind of said it on our podcast in our roundtable portion, I just assumed that they were turning the ball over in droves and they were not taking it away enough. They're not taking it away enough. They only have one takeaway all year, but they're also not turning it over. So, like, what is there a path out for this team, given that it's not like all these recurring ball security issues, or is there not a path out for this team to contend this season?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's looking more and more unlikely that this is going to be a team that can contend. That's first and foremost. But I will say I think it does have to start defensively with the Jags. I mean, they have so much invested up front, particularly in that defensive line, right? You had Josh Hines-Allen, who had 17 and a half sacks last year. You have Trayvon Walker, former number 1 overall pick, had double-digit sacks last year. You bring in Eric Armstead. I believe it was like 3-year, $50 million something deal. We know the success he had in San Francisco. It's going to have to start with those guys up front. And they weren't able to get after to bring CJ Stroud down. They were able to get after him a little bit, but then I think about that Monday night game where they didn't sack Josh Allen once. It was just an awful showing from their part, but it's going to have to start defensively. The tricky part with that too is I talked about the injuries that the Colts have kind of dealt with, but with the Jags too. I mean, their number 1 corner, Tyson Campbell, is on IR. Darnell Savage, kind of a safety nickelback for them, he didn't play last week. Foye Oluokun, who's one of the top middle linebackers in the NFL, he's on IR. Devin Lloyd, former first-round pick a couple years ago, he starts alongside Foye Oluokun. He missed this past game, was kind of a surprise inactive due to injury. And so they're going to need these guys back, right, in that back seven. But I think that front is where they have so much invested in it. And I think they're going to need those guys to start playing at a higher level, because they don't have the personnel on the outside to really challenge teams, right, because of the way their secondary, how the back end has kind of been decimated to this point. And offensively, I don't think you can really lean on them right now because, I mean, Evan Ingram is hurt. And then, as I talked about the confidence issues with Trevor Lawrence, they are getting Brian Thomas Jr. and Christian Kirk the ball, but it's still not, they're not really able to get anything going. And the confidence just doesn't seem to be there. So I think the defensive line is where it's going to have to start with Jacksonville.
All right, let's talk about Tennessee. They beat the Miami Dolphins 31-12 on Monday Night Football. Just like a weird game where Will Levis exits with a shoulder injury. They bring on Mason Rudolph. They do some decent things, but mostly that game to me, Ben, kind of felt like the Dolphins just not being able to function as an NFL team without Tua in there. The Tennessee's 1-3. Mm-hmm. They've got a bye coming up, and then they host the Colts in week 6. Kind of the same question for you on the Titans as I just asked you on the Jaguars. What's Tennessee's path out of this slow start to the season?
Well, it has to start with Levis, right? And better decision making, right? I mean, 9 turnovers in 3 games and a drive or 2 is completely unacceptable. And yeah, so it has to start there. I mean, we could be having a completely different conversation if Will doesn't have some of these turnovers, these giveaways at kind of like the worst situation possible. Like the situational decision making has really hurt the Titans, because I think otherwise, I mean, their defense has played really well. They're number 1 in total defense right now. They're number 3 in yards allowed per play. They have I know the Titans have their own injuries that they're dealing with too, but having L'Jarius Sneed At corner, T'Vondre Sweat, rookie defensive tackle out of Texas, is a handful at the nose spot. They have a lot going for them defensively, and then I think they have a pair of really good running backs in Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. So they have the personnel at wide receiver to do some damage, right? But I think it just kind of comes back to that decision making. And as Brian Callahan told reporters at the end of last night's game in Miami, like, as long as Will is healthy, like, he's their quarterback, right? So he needs to be able to protect the ball, because I think if they protect the ball, this is a team that is a lot more competitive than I think a lot of people think, because I think top to bottom, like, this isn't a team that doesn't have talent. They have plenty of talent. And so I think that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, Ben, when they made all those moves in the offseason to get Calvin Ridley, L'Jarius Sneed, Tony Pollard, Bill Callahan, like, obviously we're talking about a coach there, but I kind of thought, okay, that's going to just raise their floor up as a team of, like, it's hard for me to see this team not winning 6 or 7 games just with their level of talent. But like you said, if Will Levis keeps turning the ball over, that's a problem there. I just real quick on their defense. Denard Wilson comes in from Baltimore as defensive coordinator. I thought that was a really sharp hire by Brian Callahan to bring him in, a guy from that Mike McDonald tree out in Baltimore. What has he brought to that defense that's kind of led to some of the success they've had so far?
Yeah, I think the aggressiveness, first and foremost. They press guys. They're aggressive at the line of scrimmage. They're able to stop the run. The takeaway. So one thing that hasn't quite worked to this point, and I know the Titans are working on this, is the takeaways. They only have 1 or 2 on the season, and that's kind of surprising, right? Because of all the success that Denard Wilson had in Baltimore, with how many takeaways they got last season, and then the year before that with the Eagles in their Super, I believe it was their Super Bowl year. Mm-hmm. So that's something that they're hoping kind of changes. They got a takeaway for in the Dolphins game last night, and I think sometimes with takeaways, when you see one, the floodgates open, so to speak. And so I know they're hopeful for that, but yeah, I think just his whole aggressive press man, and that's why L'Jarius Sneed is such a great fit. We know what he was able to do for Kansas City, and bringing that kind of philosophy to Tennessee, and what he was able to do against Tyreek Hill last night. And yeah, I think the aggressiveness is the biggest thing, but the takeaways, I think if they can start taking the ball away from the opposing team, that's when I think this defense can really start to take off, right? Because if they're already number 1 in total defense without giving their offense more opportunities, I think once they're able to do that, I think this is when it could really start to come together for them.
All right, the Houston Texans are 3-1. They lead the AFC South, but maybe not the juggernaut that I think some folks assumed they would be right out of the gate. They lose by 27 to the Minnesota Vikings in week 3. They have some narrow victories over the Colts, the Bears, and the Jaguars. Is there any reason to be worried? If you predicted Houston's going to win the division, is there any reason to be worried that they might not run away with this thing in the way that I think a lot of folks sort of assumed they would based on the offseason they had and then bringing CJ Stroud into year 2?
Yeah, I don't think you're concerned if you have the Texans kind of winning this division. I mean, first of all, you have to look at what the division has looked like to this point. But yeah, they do have a lot of things to clean up. And on offense, right, the side of the ball where you thought it was just put up 30, 35 points a game and everything was going to be good. But I think what we've learned to this point is how important Joe Mixon is for the Texans. Like, they need as much firepower as they have at the pass catching spots. Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz at tight end. They need to be balanced. They need to be able to keep defenses honest and not having Joe. I mean, we saw what he did to the Colts, right? In week one, running for nearly 160 yards. And since, I mean, he's kind of battled an ankle injury, and I think, and we've seen kind of the run game not really play to its capability. I mean, last week he didn't play. They didn't look that good running the ball. The Minnesota game, he played sparingly. He wasn't 100%. They also struggled running the ball in that game. So I think we've learned how important Joe Mixon is. And I mean, it doesn't seem like Joe Mixon's injury is going to be a long-term thing. So I think you can find some solace there if you're looking at the Texans. And then I think just execution-wise, like it's kind of been surprising the number of penalties, right? Like they're kicking themselves in the foot. Like Laremy Tunsil, as great as he is, one of the top blindside protectors, left tackles in the game, like he leads offensive linemen in penalties, like false starts and what have you. And so all that has to be cleaned up. But yeah, I think I don't think long term you're too concerned, and the fact that they're 3-1 despite some of the issues they've had is quite promising. I believe they're number 2 in the AFC right now overall, and then I think offensively you look at like what Nico Collins has been able to do, even with Tank Dell's slow start to the year and with his injury, like he leading the NFL in receiving yards. He's really taken another step in terms of being a guy pacing for over 2,000 yards right now. And so that's definitely helped the issues on offense for them.
All right. Always a good time to check in with you, Ben, especially a good time with all your knowledge on the AFC South. You can read Ben's work again on foxsports.com and on the Fox Sports app. Follow him on Twitter at Ben Y. Arthur. Ben, looking forward to do this again with you sometime soon down the road here.
Sounds good, JJ. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Great stuff. Thank you, Ben Arthur. That's your guy. I like what he's talking about the AFC South.
Times.
Hey, just keep us up to top in Houston. I tell you what, can't wait. That's when we're talking down the road like we were just a minute ago. Can't wait for that one in Houston. That's going to be a party.
No shortage of content for Ben Arthur with the division right now.
Yeah, right now.
Wow.
I mean, this division's got so many relevant players in it. Even though the Jaguars don't have a win, they're an incredibly relevant team in the NFL because what's going on with Trevor? They just signed him to this huge contract. Now they can't win a game. The Colts haven't won there in 10 years.
They renamed the stadium for him.
They renamed the stadium.
Trevor Bank.
That was a tough scene.
Hey, a cornered animal at 0-4. Anything can happen in the division game, guys. Give me your quick thoughts before you guys hop on a bird heading down to Jacksonville. What's going to happen? What has to happen, rather, this week for the Colts to continue on this run and get their third straight?
This is not a hot take by any means, but it's what you did last week. It's win the turnover battle. That's it for me. That's it for me. Take the ball away defensively. Take care of the football offensively. That's all I need to see.
That's simple, but to the point.
I mean, yeah.
But Jacksonville has turnover
what
issues,
a novel concept.
Right,
I know,
but you absolutely have to win the turnover battle against Jacksonville because they've turned it over. Well, actually, they've only turned it over 3 times this year. That's surprising.
Not bad.
I got to dig into that a little more. Okay. What's going on there?
Fair enough. Trevor, hey, start coughing them up.
What's happening in Jacksonville?
What's happening in Jacksonville?
All that's coming up, guys. I know we got to get out of here. Larra Overton, at Larra Overton on Twitter X, at JJ Stankevitz. And I got a tip of the hat. It was such a great environment against the Steelers. It was a great way to win. Watching our guy go down and Joe Flacco come in. I'm going to give him credit. I do it a lot. But he was so imperative, this cat here on the mic over there, because we needed it.
He narrates game day.
Yes, the fans needed narration. They needed to be tugged in hard. That's what you did. You brought them in. It was awesome. It was a great environment and a great win against that Steeler crowd, which I love. 2 years in a row.
Yeah, shout out to every Colts fan who showed up and drowned out those Steelers fans. That was great.
Well done. The Jacksonville Jaguars await. I'm just going to throw it out there right now. We're looking at a 3-2 week after this week. Yeah, I said it. Shane Steichen and the boys going down to Jacksonville to break the curse. Larra, I know you agree with me. JJ, same way. We got a whole lot more to come this week. Wednesday Thursday practices coming up. Go to Colts.com for all your latest information. Guys, I appreciate it. Thanks to Ben Arthur as well. We're going to be talking to you very soon. We'll see you this week in Jacksonville.